G'day, Matt Fulton here from mygeekculture.com.au, and it's been a while since I've released another podcast. Now, I was going through my archives and I've managed to find this classic interview with Tim Ferguson. You may know him from Doug Anthony All-Stars, Unreal TV, Funky Squad, Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, and many things. And as I was listening to this interview, I realised I have to share this. It's just awesome. He is so down to earth, very friendly, very kind, and the fact that he allowed to have more than a 5-minute chat with me. Now, when I say this was from my archives, this was an actual interview, a phone interview from a few years ago, where Canberra was celebrating its 100th anniversary. And so I was reaching out to a few Canberra personalities, and Tim was one of them. So we ended up chatting about his past, where he was born, and how Doug Anthony All-Stars, among things, came together. So please listen to this classic interview, and if you enjoy it, please let me know. Here's Tim Ferguson. You were born in Blayney in New South Wales,
which has the trophy for being the coldest place in the known universe. Now, I spent a lot of my time in Canada, in the north of Canada. I spent a lot of my time in, cold places like Holland, and they have nothing on Blayney. Blayney is as cold as witch's toes. It's not even, nestled in the comfort of a witch's bra. Having lived in Blayney, my parents had the genius idea, the brilliant idea. Why don't we go somewhere hot, they said. We said, yeah. And so they took us to Canberra, which on certain days can actually be quite temperate.
Whereabouts did you attend school in Canberra?
I went to hundreds of schools. I was always being, thrown out, really. Or we were moving town. So I went to Tilapia Park, high school. Then I went to school without walls. What's school without walls, you say? School without walls was a totally free school. It wasn't just, without a cost, but you could do whatever the hell you like, including not turn up. And it was really just a school populated by nerds, because all the bad kids wouldn't turn up. They just go and hang around, at Tilapia Park. Whereas, I would always turn up and just hang around the nerds in the library. After that, I did my final year at a place called Narrabundah College, as if those two words go together, college and Narrabundah. But apparently Narrabundah and college do go together, and I went there. It was a disaster.
Is that where you got your passion for comedy at all there, or were you studying drama?
No, nobody wanted to do comedy. This was at a time, it was before the Doug Anthony All-Stars, before Jerry Seinfeld, before Judith Lucy. This was at a time when comedy was what you did if you'd failed at everything else. So when I did become a comedian, I usually wouldn't tell people, because they'd usually, say, "Oh, you're a comedian? Oh, that's a shame. You couldn't get into NIDA." And I just, I wouldn't tell people. But comedy is now cool, thanks to the likes of, Jerry Seinfeld, Paul McDermott, Judith Lucy. And now, when I tell people I'm a comedian, they just don't believe me, because I'm not cool enough.
What were your inspirations?
The inspirations for being a comedian usually have nothing to do with other comedians. A lot of people will start up a career in comedy wanting to be, Carl Barron or Judith Lucy or Fiona O'Loughlin. This is not going to work. It's not going to work, because if you ask Carl or Judith or Fiona why they got into comedy, they're not going to say it was because they were inspired by some other comedian. They're going to say, I got into comedy because I had something to say. And also, people kept laughing at me, so I thought I'd capitalize on it.
Why not?
So in terms of comic inspiration, no, that came later. I was more interested in the First World War. I was more interested in Asian politics. I was more interested in naked women than I was ever interested in whatever comedians were doing. And if you've ever seen a woman naked, you'll know exactly why I was more interested in that than I was in, whatever Lauren and Hardy got up to. Have you seen a naked woman, Matt?
Yes, I have.
Canberra women, very hard to get a Canberra woman naked.
Well,
very, very hard. I can attest to the fact that of all the women in the whole world, the hardest ones to get into bed come from Canberra. And you want to know why? It's because Canberra women, A, are smart, B, they're good-looking enough to be able to sleep with someone else, but C, they're all screwed up over politics and feminism, and so they see sex as a surrender to the forces of the patriarchy. And so most of the time, a Canberra woman will not sleep with you. And good on her. Good on her.
Did you have...
It's true. It's fucking true.
I'm from...
You practically need to, give them your CV, your credit card details. You need a letter from your mother. You also have to apologise before you sleep with women from Canberra. You first have to say, sorry about all this. It's going to be quite demeaning. So I'm very sorry for what's about to happen.
Okay. Compose, Matt. I'll start tapping into the Doug Anthony All-Stars part of your life. How did the troupe come together? How did you meet Paul and Richard?
The Doug Anthony All-Stars just happened organically. Richard Fiddler was at university studying something useless like, arts? As if that's going to be a career. Paul McDermott was at the Canberra Art School learning how to do art, which he has since turned into an actual career. And I was, doing plays with repertory theatre and that sort of thing, and just wandering around, having a great time, trying to find out what it was I really wanted to do. Oh, and I was reading every book about law I could get my hands on. And we just kind of met. The details are vague. It was a party here, it was a love-in there, a smoke-in, at the uni. Nobody quite remembers, but eventually we all assembled on the street with Richard Fiddler playing a guitar, and it went from there.
Can you remember what the first location, your first performance was busking in Canberra?
Oh, Petrie Plaza, the magical Petrie Plaza. Not only is it windswept, but it's also swept by cleaners regularly. So it's the double-swept mall of Australia, just opposite David Jones there. And we'd cause trouble and we'd set fire to ourselves and that sort of stuff. And we'd kidnap people's prams and, auction off the children for, for gold coins, which people would drop into the guitar case. It was all cheap publicity stunts. From the very beginning, the Doug Anthony All-Stars was nothing more than one gigantic publicity stunt. And so it began there, and the next thing you know, we went from Canberra to Edinburgh. And in Edinburgh, they threw us onto a show called Friday Night Live, which was the big gig of its time on Channel 4 with Ben Elton and, Harry Enfield. And it was only when we become famous in the UK that we actually thought we might as well come back and double up and do stuff in Australia as well.
So is that how you got the attention of people on the big gig? Was it through Edinburgh, the success overseas first?
Ted Robinson, the producer of the big gig, was shown a videotape of Friday Night Live, and he thought we were Kiwis at first, But then when we were touring back in Australia, he came to see us and said, we're doing a show. So it was from our TV work in the UK, which is, it's the fastest way to do it. Nobody in Australia ever thinks you're any good unless someone from another country has said you're good, as if people in other countries have secret knowledge that we don't have. Stupid idea, but there you go.
How much input did you have in writing and performing? Was it all equally shared, or did one person concentrate on one thing, and was it like a chore?
Well, it was, everybody was always doing something, whatever was going on. Everybody had different strengths, and whether it was the painting or the comics, the books or writing material or writing songs, everybody was always working. Paul worked extremely hard. He made the terrible mistake of being good at writing songs and being a good painter. So he had to work twice as hard as anybody. Oh, and me, I was the good-looking one, so I didn't have to do much apart from lie round the pool, drinking daiquiris and letting people have their way with me so that we would move higher up in the television and film chain.
And Richard was Richard.
And Richard was Richard. Richard is, he's an enigma. Richard was always very good with the money. And you always need someone in the band who can count. And again, I was a good-looking one. Counting was not my strength. My strength, as I said, was daiquiris and occasionally martinis. And then doing whatever I was asked by whoever asked me.
After re-watching again, I don't know how many times I've watched now that your DVD of the Doug Anthony All-Stars from the big gig, you guys spent, it looks like that year had so much energy for each performance, and after a while it just looked exhausting for you guys just to constantly dance, run around, muck around, to nearly injure each other, and you're all just covered in sweat under those hot lights in the studio. Did you have to constantly remain fit and look after yourselves to keep up such an energetic performance each time?
We ate a lot of fast food. The reason for this was it was full of carbohydrates and fats that we could burn up during shows. So, yeah, the shows were very energetic, but it was only made possible by junk food, a lot of it. And, bourbon and water. So, the shows were very energetic. People would always say, oh, man, you guys, you must be off your faces. And you just can't do that. You can't make an audience laugh if you're off your face. You just can't. Believe me, I tried. We gave it a good crack one night when we were in Queensland, and it doesn't work. So, yes, despite, appearances, the All-Stars were always desperately sober. Well, at least until the show was over. Then the bourbon would come out.
What's your most memorable favourite show to work with?
Show that was the most fun would have to be Don't Forget Your Toothbrush. That thing was just out of control. That was like the party train to Happyville. There was a huge studio audience. There was, the best band in the country. We had, a gigantic production values. We had helicopters at our disposal, jet planes. It was, as far as game shows go, as much fun as you could possibly have. The other thing I liked about doing Don't Forget Your Toothbrush was that it was a pitchfork up the nose of inner city smartasses. And I've spent most of my life sticking pitchforks up their nose, which is very easy to do because they assume I'm one of them. So it's always a surprise to them. Another show I always enjoyed was Unreal TV. We did, I think, 875 series of Unreal TV. Unreal ads, Unreal shocks, Unreal ups, Unreal downs. And the thing I always liked about that was not so much the clips, which were the usual tawdry muck that you get on the on the market of clips. But I always like saying goodnight to Australia and then demanding that a fluffer be brought to me. So I say, goodnight, Australia. Okay, bring in the fluffer. And only people who know what a fluffer is would know what a fluffer was. But all those families watching would say, oh, it must be some sort of toy. And I guess it is.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, and I'm sorry for keeping you on the phone for so long.
Oh, God, no. Hey, man, it's all part of the self-aggrandizement, which has never stopped.
Of course.
Thanks, man.
Thanks very much for listening, and please, by all means, if you want more podcasts in the future, please reach out to me, info@mygeekculture.com.au, or visit the website mygeekculture.com.au, bookmark it, and then check once in a while. I might release something else if I do find anything else in the archive. Anyway, I'm Matt Fulton, and thanks very much for listening.